Welcome to On the Chain with Jeff and Chip.
Hey, welcome to the Roundtable. This is Jeff. I'm here with co-host Chip. We have an amazing guest with us. You guys know him. It's none other than Brad Kimes. Welcome, Brad Kimes. It's awesome to have you on with us tonight.
Hey, man, thank you guys so much. You know, we've been trying to make this happen for a long time, and I feel very good about the fact that we're doing this right now. So thank you guys. Thank you both.
This is awesome. Yeah, this is awesome. We're going to talk about a lot of great things. I know you get into a lot of the theories behind digital assets being applied to the world economics, and there's really been a lot happening over the past week, especially when it comes to the stimulus package, trying to bail us out. It has this appearance that the global economy is crashing all around us. Big corporate bailouts. They just signed this stimulus package yesterday, where they're just kind of sprinkling this $1,200 on the people, and the big corporates are getting billions of dollars, to just keep them, living in their slush funds. So one part of this that I thought would be really interesting to start with, because it was in, then it was out, is this idea of a digital dollar. I know it's kind of bizarre because we've seen over the past year the Token Taxonomy Act and other items to push regulatory clarity in the digital asset space has come to the Financial Services Committee, has gotten in front of Maxine Waters. Now all of a sudden from the Maxine Waters desk, there appears this digital dollar, while supposedly the Fed is on the sideline on this. The government's on the sideline. The Financial Services Committee has no idea what's going on, supposedly. And then, bam, in our face, this digital dollar. But it isn't really what it seems to be. So I thought this would be an awesome place to kick things off.
Well, again, thank you both for having me. And I think it's an excellent place to kick things off. I think you frame it really well. When you look at the legislation that was in the stimulus bill, we all got very excited. We saw digital dollar, digital wallet, member banks, non-member banks to the Federal Reserve, how they're going to handle it. They even went as far as, if you're homeless and live in the woods, they created a digital wallet for you and you can access it through the post office or an ATM. I mean, that's how thought out they revealed to us the effort has been put into digitizing the US dollar. And it's very exciting. Then we found out they took it out of the stimulus, right? And everybody started freaking out. Well, it's gone. Bummer. That was a good idea. Now it's gone. And then they said, well, it's in a separate bill. Now it's in a separate bill. It's introduced into the Senate. And people still feel like, yeah, but something's up because it's not right. It's not in the stimulus. Now it's not going to pass. The stimulus is passed. I would just say that the best thing that could have happened was that all of that verbiage is placed into its own bill. And the reason I feel that way is because the national stimulus bill is a national emergency bill, and it has a deadline of when it will end, and all of those emergency things will end and go away. And had they put that digital dollar in the wallet and everything else in that emergency legislation, it would end when all the relief ends. Taking that information out and putting it in its own bill is the best thing that could ever happen, because this means to me it will stand on its own and it will be the new monetary financial system and the changeover that we've all been waiting for to happen, and it will be permanent when it passes.
Well, one thing I wanted to jump in is that when I started seeing all the people on the Twitterverse, basically all the chatter out there, everyone thinking this was great. And, I'm in a lot of these DM Twitter groups. And of course, also an insider. I'm referring to the insiders group that Brad, DAI, and Mr. B run. And one of the things I really enjoy about that is that the level of conversation is just on another level. It really is. The people in there are just amazing. And the stuff that gets dropped in there, you're playing. It's just another step above that you're not going to get on Twitter. You're not going to get in other places. So when I go in there and start looking at the chatter, and sometimes I don't go on there for 2 days. I get busy and I go in there. It tells me how many messages I'm missing. I'm like, how did I miss all this? Holy crap! So it's like it's impossible to read them all sometimes. It's just like zooms to the bottom and I start working backwards.
Yeah.
But the digital dollar, I'm not a fan of. I thought it was one of the dumbest ideas probably ever put forth. And to me, it doesn't surprise me because it's government. And government, it doesn't create anything. They're not responsible for anything. All they do is they can legislate. They don't actually do anything of value as far as representation of people. And people are like, no, bro, but it's a step. It's a step to the next thing. It's not it's not what we were looking for. First of all, the Federal Reserve, to me, 1913 pushed through in a panic, basically, another sort of crises, if you will. And then we have to live with it. The problem I have with it is the whole sovereignty. You can't have a sovereign nation if you are going to now be relying on this third party, which never really has ever been audited, never opens up the we can kind of see what's happening on their books a little bit. We have a little purview into it. But the idea of digitizing a dollar, first of all, they're printing like mad people, okay? They're out of their minds, just printing. Well, 2 more trillion, let's do it, And you look at like Bush came in, he added 5 trillion plus to the, then we're up at 10, then Obama put 10 billion, and now Trump is pretty much leading the way. He will surpass any president the way things are going right now. So I didn't really care for the digital dollar the way it was presented. Is it a good thing? No, because it wasn't blockchain based. Basically, it's like a gift card. I put it on a gift card. Yeah, you can have a ledger, but I don't know what you guys think about this. I don't think anything that happens out of the Federal Reserve is a good thing. I don't think digitizing stuff. I know we have the Corona. I know we have there's some other things that, fiat currency they're looking at digitizing. To me, that's everything that goes against what we're looking to do. We're trying to break away from that. We're not going to let's make the dollar digital now. Okay, so is it finite? Or do we print that too? Do we just say there's an infinite supply of it that we can continue to roll out?
Well, Jeff, did you want to comment on that? Because I definitely want to. Do you want to?
No, go ahead and comment, and then I'll throw mine in after.
Yeah. So, look, there's a lot of things that resonate with me about what you said there. For one, I am not a fan of the Fed, and we align beautifully on that. Now, I do see it slightly different about the digital dollar in the respect of, I believe in order to get Main Street and Wall Street really into this crypto digital asset space that is being legitimized right before our eyes, they have to have the on and off ramps. We have to have that moment and threshold of normalization where we bring everybody over into the digital realm and the digital financial plumbing payment system. And I think this is their way of approaching that. Now, to go to the deeper layer, that next layer down, where you talk about, how does this work? Is it finite? What can they do here? Do they still have the same ability to just print digital dollars like they do paper money? I think this is where we start to come into a couple different areas or thoughts or philosophies of what may take place. I think we've been watching the Fed do what they always do. It's quantitative easing, and when it gets really bad, it's a stimulus check to your house, and that's what we're having now, right? But this moment we are living in is a historical moment. They are doing it to a tune that not even the Fed has done before, and that's quite a statement in itself. Co-host on my show on the Investment Perspective channel, I have 2 channels now, but the co-host on Friday mornings, Cryptopolis, has really inspired me because of what he has found to look into the 1929-1933 bankruptcy that the United States went through during the Great Depression era, right? And not many people realize that the United States declared bankruptcy back then. And if you look into that, what I see, and I even have it here, the Emergency Banking Act, there was quite a few things that were done there that look exactly like what is happening right now. And I mean to the letter. So the bailout that's happening now, back then they had a national holiday where they literally shut down every bank because there was a bank run from the citizens of the country rushing to take their dollars out of the system. Now, today we have a current health event is what I call it, because I don't know if my channel got suspended for saying it, and I don't want to mess your channel up, but we had a current health event that really says to leave your paper cash in the bank because germs can be on it for 17 days. So really, most stores you go to prefer you to use a card, credit card, or debit card. What does all this really mean? To me, what it all means is both things are very real. There has been a recession coming to this country, and it is here. I feel like there is absolutely a financial reset happening in this country as well as the globe, and it's taking place right now. Now, am I right about that? Well, time's going to tell. But I do believe that there's two real things happening. There is a very real health event taking place, and there's a very real economic collapse taking place, and it's systemic at this point. And instead of them waiting for it, I believe they're actually preempting it, and they're shutting it down under the notion of this health epidemic or pandemic. So when I look at that, I start going, okay, what's the Fed going to do? They're setting historical records on printing money and adjacent with the Treasury, because the Treasury prints money, the Fed expands its balance sheet. They're in bed together, and that's how that works. So when I look at that, I start saying to myself, well, what's going on here? Because it looks a lot like, to me, I'm going to bring this down to I just know a guy, right? So imagine somebody you work with, that just constantly lives outside of their means. And everybody knows that guy or has been that guy maybe in their life and back in 2008 or whatever. And the bubble popped and they knew that they were going to end up going into bankruptcy. And I knew a handful of people, and what they did was get even more credit cards and blow them up and just blow them up and get as much stuff that they could get because they knew the jig was up.
Right.
If we come back to the macro of what's happening here, it's exactly what I see here. The money that's being printed now, I really believe, is being printed and passed out to all the too big to fails because they are giving them the money and liquidity they need to take them to the bankruptcy moment where we actually switch over. And there's a document that I've shared on my show, which is really, and I have it here. I'll just read you the title of the document, and it's a Bankruptcy Reform Act that was put together in April 2017, released to the president in 2018. And I got this from Spencer H. Shout out to him. Orderly Liquidation Authority and Bankruptcy Reform. They have a chapter in there for the new bankruptcy, and it's during a post-crisis situation, how to handle it. And now they do this before, so I'm not trying to project that this has never happened before, but they're preparing in this document for a crisis situation where they can do a bankruptcy on a Friday and be back in business on a Monday. So it's a 48-hour resolution bankruptcy for the too big to fail if the preponderance of evidence shows that the financial stability to the economy suggests that this bank or this corporation is too big to fail. What I see out of all of this information and the digitization or talk of it or the submission to the Senate now with this bill about the digital dollar is we are absolutely headed to that place. What I do believe further than that is that this is going to take us to where we actually do get to see at some point, like Chris Larson says, a neutral reference point asset placed in the middle of the currencies of the world. And that neutral reference asset, I believe, is going to be XRP. And it sounds very, very futuristic. But as you mentioned, Bretton Woods, this idea came from the original Bretton Woods back in 1933 or 44, whatever the date is now, it's escaping me. But that came from that meeting from John Maynard Keynes, who suggested the Bancor coin, the BNCOR coin, which they didn't have the technology to do it. So they went with the US dollar as the global reserve instead. Well, look at the problems we're into now. And if they do something like this with the neutral reference point of XRP, I believe that the 5 major currencies of the world that sit in the IMF basket will back their currency by gold. And they'll go back onto a gold standard, which will make you happy, Chip, because that means if they're on a gold standard, you just can't print. And that was the reason they came off of the gold standard to begin with, right? Because it gave them the freedom to print as much as they wanted. When you're pegged and held to gold, you can't do that, right? You're held within a confines. However, the other reason for coming off the gold standard was because it was a global reserve status, and the dollar was serving a international global reserve status as well as a local national reserve status. And any policy decision they made was either for the globe and it hurt at home, or they make a decision for home and hurt the rest of the globe. And that's currently what's happening now as well, right? So I think the deal is that we're about to see a changeover, and I would expect the US dollar to remain a unit of account because of all the legacy systems around the world that use the USD as a unit of account. But then I would expect to see the other two aspects of a good solid currency, which is a medium of exchange and a store of value, to be shifted to XRP, because that is a utility asset, and that's what it would serve as, in a nutshell.
That's a ton. Yeah, that's a lot of info. Yeah, I think, we could break this down. You definitely approach that, from a really well thought out spot. Some of the other elements to plug in there is what's happening from a political perspective. So we can look at the economics, but there's still other elements. One of them is the consolidation of power right now that's going on over in China and Russia. So we don't know what that power play is going to be, but I think it's going to be a dragged out economic and political Cold War that we're going to see go on for a really long time. And the reason why I say that is because Putin just, he passed the legislation to allow him to run and basically be in office until 1936. So he's consolidated his power as a dictator in Russia, which is really dangerous. That he's done that. We saw what happened in Venezuela. It's destructive to its people, and it's going to be destructive to the world stage from a political perspective. Extremely, extremely dangerous, considering that they're armed with nuclear weapons. And then on the other side, you have China, which has been undermining the world economies, for a long time. And unfortunately, companies, big companies, all companies, have leveraged this quote unquote slave labor or cheap labor over in China to generate big profits, for their companies. Now we're going to pull that carpet out from under their feet. And these corporations are going to have to figure out how to live off of smaller profits, and it can't be off the back of the government. And so the government's going to have to shrink in the U.S. We're going to have to pull power away from the U.S. government and put it back in the hands of the people. But while that's happening, China is going to suffer significantly from an economic perspective as we pull factories out. Now, if the factories don't come out in the next 6 months, there's going to be huge punitive damages levied against them from the U.S. government. Apple being one of the bigger, bigger companies.
Be careful there, Jeff. About Apple.
Yeah, my point. No, I know, but here's my point with that is that Apple, making all their products over in China, and then charging, ridiculous amounts of money for that product. But they're, so when we see Apple shift, which I believe that they will, so I'm not saying that they're not going to, I believe they will, but so will all the other big companies. And when you see a company like Apple flee production over in China, it's going to have big ramification from a political perspective and an economic perspective in China. And that's why they're also working right now to consolidate power. Now, what does this all have to do with the U.S. dollar and the economy and the digitization of the economy? There's been some interesting things going on over in China from and big announcements there. At least seems to be moving in a direction of a central bank digital currency. So China shifting in a digital currency direction. Russia's been interesting. They've been consolidating power in the digital economy and the digital currency space so that they control it as China's doing on their end. So we see that from that perspective, and like what you're saying, Brad, also is that we're moving and it's going to happen rapidly, but those countries are already positioning themselves in that digital environment. Now it's up to the U.S., because that's going to be, there's all these other world, players as well, but the big players are going to be Russia, China, and the U.S. as we're jockeying for position from a political and economic perspective. The EU is slightly in turmoil right now with Brexit. So the UK and the US are going to be consolidated together, as a powerhouse. We'll see how the rest of the European Union breaks out and see how that has an impact. So it's really interesting because all of that has something to do with what's going to happen. Now, from the U.S. perspective, I think it was really dangerous that they introduced this digital dollar because it's bad timing, if anything. So I feel that all this discussion for the past year and a half, and I could be wrong, but it's one of those things like all the other pork fat that was in that bill. They're just trying to throw something else in there that is outside of our control, outside of our knowledge. And like you said, the fact that it's broken out, I think, is a good thing. The fact that it goes into its own bill is even a better thing because now it gives pure visibility to what it can be. And so that was an important aspect. The fact that so many of these governments are taking advantage of the crisis, like Rahm Emanuel always says, don't waste a good crisis. And that's where we saw, this piling on of all sorts of garbage into that bill, taking advantage, politics as usual, the bickering and all that stuff going on. And then all of a sudden this digital dollar, so it's like, hey, let's give the Fed more control and the government more control without telling the people really what it's going to do. So that's where, I have a lot of concern, happy that it's not in there now. But also I want to keep it out there a little bit at an arm's length as we see this consolidation going on globally, because that is where I see, we're still going to have some issue, big issues.
Without a doubt. Well, I want to jump in there and just correct the record here. So Austin, Texas makes the MacBook Pro. I think, Jeff, you're right. I think, obviously people know I'm a big Apple guy, but what I've seen just by I've got some contacts and people that work with organizations that have a lot of manufacturing in China. They're pulling out. They've been pulling out. So what people don't realize, what these tariffs have done, these tariffs not only putting billions of dollars coming into the country, but they have basically hurt China more than ever. Why? Because the companies don't want to pay them. Now, when it was early days and the tariff was a little bit, what they were doing was taking the burden. The companies were paying it. They didn't want to transfer it to the consumer. When it started getting, and I'm not even talking about really consumer, it's more to B2B. The B2B, this business here would absorb it so that this business didn't have to pay the tariff. Well, as the tariff started increasing, they had to pass some of that on. As they passed it on, it turns out they went elsewhere, right? And to Brad's point, circling back, if we were going to look at a reset, right, what would you want to do? You want to get everything in order, your house in order. So what's the first thing you want to do? You want to get your trade deals in order, right? You want to get rid of NAFTA. You want to start putting trade deals in with China that makes sense, not where we get bent over. And let's be fair, the first round of that was the first time China has ever been held to account. It was like, hey, wait a minute, you're going to charge us 25%, 40% to put goods. It was costing dairy farmers just into Canada. They're paying $2.40. They're not going to buy our dairy. They're not going to buy cheese. They're not going to buy any of this. So if you're going to do a reset and you want to get your house in order, well, you start bringing manufacturing back. And that's one of the things we've seen with this administration, putting a heavy focus on, people can talk what they want about the MAGA, Make America Great. America's always been great, in my opinion. We've always been the best at figuring stuff out. So when I saw this pandemic happen, I said, we have the best minds in the world working on this right now. We've got organizations coming to it. I see Apple saying, hey, we're working all of our sources to get these masks in. You got people stepping up on a lot of different levels. So when I look at this from a global type of scale, what Jeff's talking about, politics work into this to a degree. But if you were looking at doing this, Brad, it's like what you were saying, right? So I happen to know a lot about bankruptcy because I'm pretty connected to it. I don't want to get into too many details, but people always run up the credit card, right? So if you're going to do that, 2 trillion, 4 trillion, whatever, if you're going to do some sort of a reset, and going back to your opinion of like, where do you get the liquidity from? Where does the liquidity actually come from, right? And, the whole idea of XRP, the whole idea of Ripple and their software, people said, well, can the administration take over, production like they did with General Motors? General Motors said, yeah, we can give you 40,000 of these ventilators. And then, oh yeah, maybe by the end of May, we can only do 6 6,000. Meanwhile, you got someone like Dyson, who's been an innovator, in a weekend puts together a ventilator and says
a brand new ventilator,
a brand new one that no one's ever
technology. Yeah,
in a weekend, right? In the course of a week, and they'll be rolling out 6,000 like in the next 2-3 weeks. So I like the innovation that's happening. I like when anytime on a global scale we get put with something, and people go like, well, they're hammering Trump about we're going to reopen on Easter. Well, or famously remember John F. Kennedy saying, hey, we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. If you don't declare something, you never live into it. If you don't have a target, just like, yeah, we'll get that done. When? I don't know, some point, maybe it might happen. I don't know. I can't exactly tell you when. So you got to live in this stuff. And if you put something out there, people are working to hit the target. And if they miss the target, that's okay. You reestablish the target, but you have to have something to sort of, live into and work to.
I agree. And there's a lot there. You guys make a lot of great points. Let's see if we can unpack some of this. So let's start with the geopolitical and political realm. Very real scenario, very real world, right? I personally believe, first of all, I don't have any political affiliation one way or the other. So the things that I say and reference, I'm referencing from a financial investment economic point of view. And it is neither an endorsement nor a non-endorsement for either thing that I say. So
that was a disclaimer right there, folks. That's what they call the
exactly
disclaimer.
That was a good disclaimer.
That was a good disclaimer, right?
Okay,
because I'm going to drop these things, and I want everybody to understand it's objective when I say them, and they're not coming from a place of bias, at least from political bias. So what I see worldwide is over the last few years, the current president has been going around and working trade deals, and there are more contracts than they are agreements that need to be done through Congress. So they're business contracts, and he doesn't need congressional approval for them. Number two, I've also seen an enormous amount of XRP be sold and wallets be created. And now I'm making that personal tie, right? But I'm making that connection. We'll get there. So because I've been seeing the current president go around and do trade deals with Japan, India, China, respectfully, right? The trade-off in my mind has been, because China holds a good portion of the U.S. debt, that there's been a trade-off here knowing that this financial reset is coming. And it's like, listen, we know how to allocate XRP to you. And if you buy this and allocate this to you, as other countries and other corporations and banks, they allocate a certain part to them or a portion to them in a wallet or a LLC holding company if they can't hold it directly. Then what they can do is say, look, you bought this at, let's say, 20 cents, right? And you got 10 million of them. When we do this financial reset and we allocate this neutral asset to be in between everybody's exchange, it's immediately going to drive the price up through some other factors we can get into. But when that happens and everybody who agrees to hold some agrees to bring their cross-border payments and push it through this new bridged path and not the direct traditional path that we normally use. Well, you say to yourself, well, why would China do that? Because their whole deal is having two different currencies, the renminbi and the yuan, so they can use the yuan outside the country to manipulate the damn dollar so they can actually make more money off of everybody. Well, the trade-off is that, first of all, the yuan is 6% weighted in the IMF basket. The US dollar is 60% weighted in the IMF basket. So the yuan's not going to be used as a global currency, even though it's talked about, right? So, but the reality here is that if you tell them, look, the manipulation's over, this is going to serve your country best and everybody else's country, because we're going to give you some XRP and we're going to give them some XRP and everybody's going to get some XRP. And we know that your economy is in shatters just like everybody else's is. And when we do this thing, everybody's going to be made whole because you're going to have some bags, just like retail speculators do, like we do. And at certain price points, it will be contractually released to you so you can get your balance sheet and your house in order. And this is how you have a currency war, which I believe really is the third world war that we're living in right now. And it's not a physical war. And thank goodness it's a way to avoid that, because this neutral asset can literally disarm all of that from happening. Because if you spread it out to everybody, adversaries and friends alike, everyone wins. That's why they would do it. So if we drill down a little further to politics in general, especially here at home, my point of view of that is politicians pass legislation, but the reason they do that is because they take money from lobbyists and the campaigns and the party campaigns that they belong to. Let me give you, for instance, if I'm a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter, you pick, it doesn't matter. If I start straying outside the bullet points and the tenets of that party line, I'm going to lose the funding from the major party campaign fund. And now I'm out just literally going door to door trying to get the money to win the seat. Why is that? Well, because they have an agenda. And if you don't serve this agenda and get out here and push what we're actually talking about pushing, right or left, you're going to lose the funds from the large party, from the campaign funds from the Republican or Democratic Party, period. That means politicians do what they're told, right? You're going to adapt and put this jacket on, and you're going to sell what the hell I tell you to sell, or I'm going to cut the funding off from the large national party fund. And now we're done. So politicians don't do anything other than what they're told to do. And now who puts that money in there? The people I follow. That's who puts the money in there. And who are the people I follow? Well, the people I follow are the federal banks, the central banks of the world, the Goldman Sachs, the JP Morgans, the ones that are doing all of this shit to begin with. Right? And if you dig down deep enough, those are the very people who have put this entire system together, and that's why it's going to happen. And at someday, all the bickering, all the grandstanding, all the earmarks will get trimmed and tailored to where they need to be. And if they got to vote somebody out, they'll vote them out. But somebody in there is going to put the right jacket on and going to put the right shit in their pocket, and they're going to be the guy or the girl who gets it done. And they're going to do what the people that I follow with all the money, who always get bailed out, no matter who's in office. Those are the people who run this world. And that's the people I'm following. And they tell the political people exactly what to do, or they won't be there anymore, right? Otherwise, what are lobbyists for? If politics made their own rules and literally did what's best for the people, then wouldn't lobbyists dry up? Wouldn't they literally dry up? Because let's face it, there's no lobbyists for the people.
That's right. No, there aren't. The representative is supposed to be the lobbyist for the people. We're the ones that are electing him to go to government to do what we're putting them for. And that's a great point. You know, in terms of who really controls the political agenda, 100%. It's the big corporations with their lobbyist groups, and the financial aspect of it is 100% accurate. I can remember going to an event, and I was talking to it wasn't, I'm trying to remember, I can't remember who it was exactly, somebody high up in politics, let's put it that way. But the point that he made really stuck out. He said, if you want to run for Congress, you need to have a minimum of $1 million in the bank before anyone's going to look at you. Yeah, you know and give you extra money.
Yeah, you know what a politician's job really is? Whether it's right or left, it doesn't matter. Your job is to take this lobbyist money and then go to the people and sell it through the platform that you
correct. That's it. You know what I would love to see though is that, you know, in NASCAR, you have all the sponsors on the cars. So you know exactly who's sponsoring that team. You know who's sponsoring the car. It's pretty clear. They have a big M for McDonald's on the car as it drives by. So you know McDonald's is paying their bill. And then when the race is over and the guy that wins gets up there and he's drinking, he's drinking a Bud or he's drinking whatever it might be, he's got his, Coke, whatever, he's drinking something, that's his sponsor, and every time he's on the interview, he has to stop and and so it'd be great if the politicians would do that. You come out with their suit and their suit's got all these patches on it. It's every one of the lobbyists and sponsors, and it would be really interesting because you're right. That's who's paying their bill, and that's who they're truly beholden to. And if they weren't, beholden to these guys from a financial perspective, they're typically out. And a perfect example of that was Alan West, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. I'm not sure if you know who he is.
I know who he is.
Look him up if you don't, but amazing guy. I really had the pleasure to get to know him, when he was here, when he was running for office, when he won. It was really an amazing period of time. But the one thing that he said when he was running, he said, look, he's been in the public service for a long time when he served in the military, and he's been doing the will of the people when he was fighting overseas. And he defended his men on the battlefield, and he was defending his constituents back home in the same way. And he said, look, what I tell you I'm going to do, I'm going to go do. Guess how long he lasted in Congress? He lasted 1 term. So he got there. It was awesome. An amazing 2-year ride, and then when he was running, for re-election, right up to the top of the food chain, at the RPOF, and I'm sure it went even farther. They basically said, look, he's not coming back, because he went out there to do what he was going to do, forget about what anyone else says. And the way they did it, they negotiated with the Democrat Party and they redistricted his district so it was impossible for him to win, and really forced him to move to another district, which he did. And it was just very difficult to win at that point, because you could see, that was also a period of time when you saw a change politically in the political environment, where you saw a clear separation at that time of the conservatives and the Republicans and the rhinos of the Republicans. And it was a separation of those who cared and those who were out there self-serving, their own interests out for, to make their own money. Clear separation. You still see it today. It's very clear. But it's amazing, and that's, to me, just resonated. I'll never forget that. I've never forgiven the people that did that. It's been, but it was eye-opening to see what happens from a political perspective, all the way down to the lowest common denominator in city government, all the way up through federal government. There's all, they're all beholden in some way, shape, or form, and it's not to the people. That's.
I want to jump in real quick because I wanted to piggyback off both of those points. But I think one of the reasons Trump is hated so much, because what he did was he upset the balance, right? There was a good old politicians club, right, where Jeff's talking about, you raised $1 million, you came in, you have these high hopes, we're going to go there, we're going to shake Washington up. And then someone takes you out back to the woodshed and says, with a big stick, and says, hey, here's how Washington works. You come out of line, you step out of line, and you're going to get whacked with this giant piece of wood right in the back of the head. And we'll do it to you. We'll take you out. What he's talking about with West. One of the things I see happen with Trump is Trump went in there. He's a business guy, right? I always thought someone with business acumen that could come in and shake things up. And what he did, Brad, what you're talking about, he blew up both parties. He showed the BS on both sides. He showed that the two-party system is a one-party, good old person's club where they all get together and they all say, we're going to do it like this. And he said, screw that. And, he was criticized at one point by the last president saying, do you have a magic wand? Well, the magic wand is simple. Business is, if you run a country like you run a business. And so who are the people that were conning people for years, so-called conservatives? They go out and have these conservative cruises and let's all get together. It was all for money. And then when you finally get somebody who looked and actually had policies that reflected what they've been, basically peddling all these years, well, guess what? Oh, no, we don't like that, because somebody when you let an outsider come in and come into, and all of a sudden you've shown the world, not just here, you showed the world that that now it's open to anybody. And you saw some other billionaires try to run, on the other side, but it's a little bit more than that. And when you're attacked 24/7, relentlessly, throat punch 24/7, it's the first time you ever saw anybody. Obama never really, he got heavy criticism from the conservatives. They were coming at him pretty hard. Then you had Bush, and so you always had these people who are taking a lot of incoming, and Bush has turned the other. Now you have somebody who's taking incoming 24/7, who fights back, doesn't let it go, and it goes back to his book where he says, "If you hit me, I'll hit you harder." And on the attack side, so I think what the big point here is that the whole thing's been blown up. Then you see Boris, you saw May, Theresa May was a giant failure. And now you're starting to see on the geopolitical side what's happening and rumbling throughout Europe, right? So now you see what's happening in Germany. Chancellor is going to be, stepping down. Merkel's gone, and you see what's happening in France. But I think there's an awakening. And I think when we talk about this, we tie it all back down to digital assets. It's on, right? It's coming. There's something in the air. I think we all know and feel it because, you talk about Celebrat. How can you continue to go business as usual when it's clearly not working?
Yeah, I think you guys are making some good points. And like I said, remind everybody of my disclaimer. I'm coming from an economic, financial investment standpoint. I'm not endorsing anyone.
That's the second time.
That's right. Yeah, I want to make it clear to people. Because
Chip, can you print it down there?
Yeah, and just have like a ticker, like a price ticker.
Whenever it flash.
And, just have the crawl on the bottom. I said this to my oldest brother before the president won the presidency in his first term. I said, the president is going to win, and it's going to be because deep state's going to help him get there. And he is there to manage a bankruptcy of the United States of America. Because if you look at his private business life, he's very good at two things, being a billionaire and remaining one. And he's done that by navigating several bankruptcies in his private business life. He's as good as navigating bankruptcies as he is building a golf course. And that's important because that's the skill set that's needed right now today. This is the moment that we're in. We're seeing the Fed push out this liquidity because they're funding the too big to fails with the liquidity and the paper they need to be able to take them to the threshold of a reset. This is exactly what's going to happen. And I really do believe this as I'm sitting here in this chair. It really is the moment that we're in. We're witnessing the bankruptcy, the second bankruptcy of the United States of America. If they were to alarm you and tell you this, it would cause a lot of civil unrest, I believe. People would become very, very anxious if we were not in our homes because of a pandemic, but because of a financial reset. So the reality is that both of those things are very real. I'm not dismissive of the health event. I'm just saying that it's awful timely, and because it is real, they can use that as the topic of discussion and not the financial reset and the economic collapse. Look, the entities that have built this space that we're moving into are the same people that broke the old traditional space that we're coming from. And the truth of that is that because of that, you have to ask yourself, they had two things they could consider. One, find the fiscal discipline that we've never had. They laughed that right out of the room. Two, create fake money and use the utility payment flows, right, and assets that we put up to inflate the value of a new commodity virtual asset that we can absolutely collateralize against and begin to shift the debt off of the fiat world onto this virtual money. And we can start and go again. And not only can we do that, but we can begin to replicate the traditional markets by building products on top of it. Swaps, ETFs, ETNs, right? Futures, the whole bit. We can replicate the whole market in the digital realm and just double down and go again. And we can address this in another 150 years. You know what they'll do in 150 years? They'll create another virtual asset. That's what they'll do. Because they're never going to find the fiscal discipline. They always get the bail. Here's the other thing, too. We don't have capitalism in this country. You believe this country is on capitalism? Everybody says, oh, he's a capitalist, and all this. But isn't it, what we're seeing isn't capitalism. What you're seeing is socialism. Too big to fail is socialism. Capitalism has got two important components to it, profit and loss. If you don't allow things to lose, you're not exercising capitalism. Period. And that's Milton Friedman. And I encourage everybody to check him out because you can learn a lot from Milton Friedman. But the truth is what we're seeing is socialism. It's being portrayed to everyone as populism and a Republican now that has shifted from populism to the party control of Republican. That's not what we're witnessing. Politics are a huge distraction. They will not allow you, if you steep yourself in them, to see exactly what's going on. The whole idea of politics, look, I'm a frequency guy. I'm a meditation, Buddhist, Hindu frequency guy. That's my game. That's my whole existence. Everything is on a frequency. There is a dissonance to politics. And when you get yourself aligned with it, you can't see. Because when you get yourself into it, you're going to opinionate yourself. And now you're going to be biased. And now I can't see what's really going on because I need to make it fit in the right jacket or the left jacket that I'm wearing. And if I can't make it fit in the left jacket, then it's just craziness. And it's just tinfoil hat stuff. And a guy like me is just a dumbass. But that's okay. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that because the things keep happening. I haven't had cable news in my house for 7 years, but how am I able to sit here and tell you I understand what's going on? Because I see the clips, and it's much easier for me to recognize the narrative when the dissident frequency begins to change with the political narrative, because I see it in social media. It starts to show up. And then it looks like a really, really bright light to me because I don't see it on a 24-hour roll. When they slip it in on 24-hour roll news cycle, you don't even know anymore when it changes. And all of a sudden now I care about who shits in what bathroom. You know what I mean? It's these things are done to distract you. You know what I mean? And the more you can minimize having those things in your life, I believe the greater your vision becomes. I really do. And 100%. It all comes back to crypto. And it comes back to digital assets. This is their way out. And you can see them now setting historical levels of printing and lending that's taking place to the very people who are building out this space. JP Morgan's going to do a coin, right? Goldman Sachs is doing stable coins. I mean, you can't make this up. These are the very players that know we're going to have our money here. BlackRock just recently appointed to deal with a lot of the investment for the government as we move through this national emergency.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I like that. You know that they're trying to find a way out. You know, there's a lot to that. Just a quick side note with Trump, you know, he never filed personal bankruptcy ever. You know, he filed, there was a couple of times business bankruptcies. There are other elements that went along with it, you know, and it's funny because, you know, he did navigate that really well. He built up the businesses really well as well. You know, there's always, outside factors leading up to it. And here's a perfect example of an outside factor that's influencing and impacting business. But Trump, you know, took the methodology that was available to him at the time, whereas all these other corporations and banks go straight to the government for handout. So instead of filing for bankruptcies, which they should have, and maybe, you know, been, you know, divided up and bought out by other companies, they go for the handout. Like you said, it's, you know, it's basically corporate socialism, you know, too big to fail. Who gets to decide which bank lives, which bank doesn't? And now they're all out there with their hands out. You know, less than a week into this thing, we saw all the airlines out there with their hands out. Hey, give us money. It's like, what are you talking about? You know, don't, you know, why? You know, why should everybody be lined up right now? At some point, there's a national security interest, and certain entities might be considered in the national interest to make sure that they do keep going, because if we lose it from a security perspective. Boeing, but should the government bail them out, or should we say, look, guys, you're gonna have to divide up your company, and we're gonna figure out another way. But your balance sheets that led you into this, not even a week into a crisis, and you can't sustain, that's problematic, you know. But to your other point, you know, to find this way out and to focus on, now we're at a point where economies around the world are facing economic crisis everywhere, and their debt sheets are going to be racked up. And I think you were talking about that earlier, or on your video yesterday as well. So now you get to a point where, and it's amazing, you know, some of the things that you brought up, it really makes some sense, you know, as people and or leaders in this country, presidents seem to be, and we can look back and say, oh, well, that's why they were there, or look forward and say, hey, this person's personality is perfect for this moment in time. Trump's moment in time is that he is a business person, and he does have to change the direction of this country that was fast slipping into a socialist mentality. And now it's time to change that and get the people back on board. You know, we're losing our identity to all these other countries, and they're fleecing us of trillions of dollars, you know, and now it's time to bring it back home. But now look at this. The balance sheet is so unbalanced, with debt. There has to be a way out. Is it a global reset? Is it a global economic reset? Is that really going to happen? That's a big question, because that's going to happen on a global scale. Everybody resets their balance sheet, or is there a mechanism in place like you're talking about, to where they bring XRP to the table, and now all of a sudden it's like, look, now we have a new asset, and this new asset is how the economy is going to run around the world. And it's going to be reliant on this new methodology. We're going to be able to transact money immediately. There's no delays. So everybody's balance sheets can be relatively equal, fast. But how is it going to happen? And we can reset this debt. Can the world leaders make that decision to say, hey, we can't, we're not going to be able to exist like this. There has to be a reset. That's an interesting thought process to go down. And then, a question back at you regarding XRP, and they decide that they want, that it becomes instrumental. I guess 2 points. How are they going to get the XRP? From your perspective, does the government buy the XRP from the holders right now as it's coming out of escrow, or are the rules changed on the escrow? And all of that XRP that's sitting in escrow, that's currently held by Ripple, is that all turned over to the U.S. government? I mean, that's the one element that go ahead.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that, because I do have a pre-allocation theory. I got a lot of different theories that I've put out here, and I think they all work together. And first of all, let's be very clear: the pre-allocation for XRP, is that part of it is very real. Brad Garlinghouse and David Schwartz in time past has acknowledged that they pre-allocate XRP. That much of it is not a theory. They can and they do it. So the theory that I have is the details about how that gets done, right? So the reality is that the $50 billion that is in escrow is in a cryptographically auto-locked escrow account. There are many different. How do we know that there aren't wallets in that cryptographically auto-locked account that aren't already pre-allocated? That's a part of my theory. So let's understand that Ripple is now referred to as not a fintech payments company or software company. They are now referred to by Brad Garlinghouse as a blockchain infrastructure company. They have developed the ILP. They have developed the XRP ledger. They have the Spring research and development launching companies out of it, right? There's many things that they have developed out of Ripple, and they are now referring to themselves as a blockchain infrastructure company. They have also hinted that they want to IPO that company, right? Which is clearly not the asset XRP. So this is important, because what they're doing is really creating a delineation between themselves as a company, just like Chevron and oil. XRP being the oil, Chevron being Ripple, right? The problem you're touching on here is simply this. That's fine to see those two entities like that in that analogy. The problem is that this particular Chevron being Ripple holds the rest of the world's oil, which is XRP, in its cryptographically auto-locked escrow account, right? And Chevron does not. It's still in the ground, and a lot of companies can pump it out, right? So this is where I believe it comes into play. So this is where I believe that we find out at some point, whether it's through the IPO, because they will not control the escrow. XRP ledger and the XRP token is a decentralized asset. I believe that over the last few years, that's what we've been seeing from 17 to 19, and maybe even a little bit today even still. We're seeing these wallets be divvied out to the players of the world that are going to contribute to bringing the utility to the network. At some point, I think we understand that there's a certain amount of that escrow that needs to stay locked up for monetary policy over the next 75, 150 years, whatever it is. So let's say 30, 40% of that doesn't become touched. It stays locked up. I believe that you may have an entity like the G20 or a spin-off consortium of the G20, which is 35, 36 of the largest economies of the world, that have already put together the FATF, What is the FATF? Right? The Financial Actions Task Force, which is the international committee and consortium from the G20 that has released the guidelines for digital currencies and crypto to the world. They're not laws, they're regulations, right? However, if you do not adhere to them by this June, they will begin to gray list imports and exports from your country. If you do not adhere after that point, they will straight up blacklist you, which means nothing goes in and nothing comes out, period. So it's not a law, but you better be doing what they tell you to do, right? What I've learned is that everything is coming down from an international level to the domestic level. Last June, when the FATF released those guidelines, within a day, Steve Mnuchin from the U.S. Treasury Department came out and endorsed every one of those guidelines, which is AML, KYC, CFT, and the travel rule. And that was all endorsed by the U.S. Treasury head, Steve Mnuchin. Now, why is that? Well, because the people that sit on the FATF panel aren't just people. They're member countries. The seats on the FATF are just like the G20. They're country seats. So the U.S. was the president of the FATF, just so happens when those guidelines were constructed for the world. Isn't that interesting? A day later, Steve Mnuchin comes out and endorses those because they know domestically they're going to make their regulations based around that framework. This is what we're seeing. At the World Economic Forum in January, we saw another consortium, a global digital council consortium put together from the World Economic Forum. They're meeting April 21st, 22nd. It will probably be a virtual meeting at this point, right? It was supposed to be in San Francisco. They have introduced at the World Economic Forum a blockchain bill of rights, an international blockchain bill of rights. You can't make this stuff up. From this, we're going to see very soon FinCEN, which is a regulatory body tied to the U.S. Treasury Department, come out and release more requirements for the digital custody and digital space in general. And that is going to be further requirements on what needs to happen with digital assets here at home, because we've had another layer of international regulations brought out. And now we're going to see another release domestically. This is happening in every country's respective, FinCEN, SEC, CFTC divisions. Every country's got their own version of that, just like the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority in UK. So all of these entities sit as members on this council for international. They come up with a framework they can all build within. There's a policy toolmaker kit that I've been showing tons of on my channel that came from the World Economic Forum. Inside the framework, it is passed out to everyone that has a central bank on what and do and how to framework build your CBDC, your central bank digital currency. It says specifically in there for intra and interbank settlement, JP Morgan coin and XRP are to be used for settlement. Well, now we come back to the global hashtag financial reset, because why would they do that? Well, because they're moving everybody's digital dollar onto a system where Bank of Stephen and the Bank of Jeff don't want each other's dollar. Well, that means obviously we have to have a reference point in between. They've already said it. Most of what I'm saying today isn't even my opinion.
Right.
What I'm talking about is what they decided on.
Let me jump in here because it's really hard for me to stay quiet for a long time. So I was pretty impressed with myself there. So
next time we're going to just mute them.
Yeah, a couple things I want to go back to. Next time it's just going to be Brad and I duking it out. No, what I wanted to go back to was I want to disagree vehemently with your theory about Trump being put by the deep state. Absolutely not. Trump was not put by anybody. It would be military. And the deep state fought him left and right. If you go back to the FISA abuses for the court that basically is allowed to spy on foreign, and they were spying on his campaign. There was a couple people that tipped him off early on But if you want to look at deep state and the trajectory of the 16-year plan they had, the first 8 were in the bag. The next 8, I don't want to get really too political on this, but I liked a lot of your other points. I'm just saying that I don't believe that for a moment that the deep state had anything to do with it. If anything, the deep state's been fighting this and wanting to crush them.
I'll help you out with this. You know, he's there to manage a bankruptcy. I don't even care who put him there. It's meaningless to me who put him there.
Well, here's the thing.
He's there to manage the bankruptcy.
Yeah, maybe. So here's the thing about bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a mechanism for companies, and the companies, when we're looking about personal bankruptcy is one thing, but the mechanism for bankruptcy is simply put to keep the tax revenue rolling. That's it. You want a company to be able to clear, move, and then be able to contribute. Because when companies go under, there's no more tax revenue. If there's no more tax revenue, then we got big problems, right? So in that case, and also when I look at the, I feel like when it comes to XRP, the interoperability is the key thing. And now you're seeing other areas moving towards this interoperability, and people don't really, at some point, do we care? We do as investors, right? We care about XRP, but I don't think in the grand scheme of things that anybody really sort of cares what's being used in the background. Because like you said, like for JPM coin, to me, that digital dollar and having, I don't trust a lot of what comes out of other areas. And I don't, without getting too political, when they start laying frameworks and we're going to do it this way and that way, central banks are bad. Central banks are bad for every country and every place. So getting away from the whole central bank thing, and central banks right now are fighting for control. They don't like what's happening. The Fed is doing all this stuff. Trump's first year, they started incrementally raising the rates, right? Even though the numbers we have to look at the economy are all BS. I think we all can agree on the fact that these numbers that were put in place to elevate, things have not been good for a long time. It doesn't matter the administration. It hasn't been good, but we have these numbers that make it look so rosy, right, Jeff? Where am I going wrong?
No, that's I agree with that. Here's another point, and it's interesting because we've talked about this before, where as we move forward, and as Brad's saying, XRP being the underlying mechanism to move other digital assets and utilizing the Ripple solution, the ODL solution, that's the mechanism of really connecting all the pieces, all the countries, all the banks, whatever it might be. Let's move everybody's currency freely and make it efficient. The one issue that I still see as a possibility on the XRP side, from an investment perspective, as an investor, that we bought the XRP, banks don't want individuals to regular individuals, let's call them, you're not an accredited investor, you don't meet their financial criteria to play in their sandbox. They don't want the regular people there. Another conversation we get in other things. But if we look back, from that perspective, banks want their own banker entity, their banker software, their banker transactions, all of this. But if you go back and we say, okay, if XRP becomes this global denomination of transactional currency between all these entities, again, utilizing ODL, utilizing, elements from Ripple. If we think back, you're talking about 1933, and we had the executive order 6102. This came up on our show the other day as well, to where, and this was under President Roosevelt, forbidding the hoarding of gold bullion, gold coins, gold certificates, whatever it might be inside the U.S. And that's why we can't hold gold bars and stack them up in your house. Now imagine they look at this and they say, okay, government and banks and Fed and everybody around the world, we're going to roll out this XRP. However, there's people all over the world that hold it. It's a small percentage of people, but there's people that hold it. Either they're going to grandfather them in and say, okay, you guys are the big shots now in this space, or what they're going to do is pass an executive order in the U.S. and say, you know what, nobody gets to hold it anymore because it's now a transactional currency only held by banks and the government. What do you think about that?
I think you make a good point. And Stephen, I want to bring it up that I'm glad that you went back and correct that point. I thought it was a very good point that you went back and cleaned that up about Trump. I do agree with you on that. And to the point about, I have covered this a lot about XRP. Will we as retail holders be able to hold XRP? Will they try to tell us we got to go or what have you? I have covered this extensively, Jeff, and the answer for me is no. They will not take it from us. It won't be like gold back in the day. And the reason it won't be like gold back in the day is a couple things. One, just simply this. What do they keep doing with XRP? They keep adding it on exchange after exchange after exchange to more pairs, to more pairs, and to more pairs. Why is that? Because the more they connect it to more pairs and to more exchanges, the more access to liquidity they get. If they were going to take this away from us, they would not pursue opening up more back doors for everybody to get in while they're telling all of us we got to bring it in and turn it in, right? So that's the biggest sign right there that that isn't happening. The method isn't taking place.
Yeah,
right?
but I don't know about that though. Only because the ones that are creating the pairs would be, you know, are the exchanges themselves that are privately held exchanges. So, you know, let's say Binance or, you know, Bitrue or Sologenic or Coinfield, all these exchanges that are popping up that are pairing XRP with other things, but they're doing it as a company to the retail investor, to your point. Exactly. What I'm thinking is, so for right now, from this perspective and Ripple's perspective, allowing it to happen, I don't even know if they can allow it, whether they even have a choice in the matter. If someone decides, hey, I'm going to pair everything to XRP on my exchange, that's your prerogative, you know, and go ahead and do it. Hopefully they have the backing of Ripple if they need it. I don't know if they even need it, but I'm thinking if, and these are all, everything we're talking about is just conjecture anyways, you know, we don't know. But if, let's say, the government decides, hey, you know what, this is how we want it, and we're going to pass an executive order, like they did with gold, because before 1933, everybody could use, you know, hold gold and store gold and buy gold and do whatever you wanted with gold, you know, and then all of a sudden they came out and said, no, you can't do that anymore. You know, and well, so that's a possibility here too.
Well, let me ask you a question.
I don't know.
I don't believe it is because it's a decentralized asset on a decentralized ledger. There is
that's the number one. Yeah.
There is no total control of it.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So even Ripple can't freeze your XRP, right? You know, and how are they going to know you have it on cold storage? And then I go to some other country and then use it. You see what I mean? So it's like, you know, I get the notion and the fear and the worry because I've covered it extensively. And listen, I'm not selling any used cars. You know what I mean? You know, it's just my personal belief with the work that I've done, I'm not seeing it happen because let's look at another notion here. If we go to the XRP Rich List, okay, I think we could easily come to the conclusion that anybody with a 5 million XRP wallet is more than likely not a retail holder. Maybe there's a couple, but 5 million and up over a billion is 467 wallets. Do you know how much XRP is in those wallets? It's more than 40 billion XRP. Do you know what that means? That means there's 43 billion plus in circulating supply right now, which isn't true. What that really means is that there's actually only 3 billion in total circulating supply. That 40 billion plus is exactly the stuff that I've been talking about. That is the entities, central banks, governments, and alike, plus ones we don't even know about, probably that hold wallets in escrow, right? And they're contractually going to be released to them at some point. You know, that tells you right there, there is only 3 billion plus in circulating supply, even though it shows 43. Because those top wallets are not available for sale. They are holding that XRP, so when it goes up in price, because they know, here's the deal, they know what is going to happen to it. Last summer in Q2, there was 900 million XRP sold over the counter. And no one's using it. Now listen, that is either the greatest salesman on earth, and I hope he's got an office with a window.
Or she, let's use the right pronouns here.
Take it on home. You know what I mean? You know, whoever that is the best salesman on earth. I don't care if it could be Chewbacca. You know what I mean? It is the greatest salesman on earth, right? I mean, think about it. You know what I mean? How do you sell 900 million to people and entities and convince them not to use it yet? There's a go date that they know about.
There's more going on. Yeah, there's more going on.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin is even less than that. You look at Bitcoin, when it's all said and done, 16 million. There's like close to 10, 21 million total. I mean, think about that. I mean, you want to talk about scarcity, man. There's probably thousands of it.
It's a good point,
maybe a million. I mean, you're not going to have any of that stuff moving. It hasn't moved. There's been a lot of Bitcoin stuck in wallets, has never moved, you know, I mean, because obviously the whole Satoshi thing, but guys, you know, I'm looking at the clock here. I'm really enjoying the conversation here. It probably could go on a little bit, but I think we're coming up on our hour, if I'm looking at my time correctly here. And I think it might be time to sort of, you know, continue the conversation as we walk on over to the after show exclusively on Coil, which a platform we like because we obviously are, loving the idea of what Coil is about. And you don't have to have a subscription. Now, the $5 subscription to do it. It's nice because it helps out creators, a lot of great creators, bloggers on that platform. But Brad, in closing, Jeff, let's just go ahead and let's wrap this and let's head over to the after show. I want to see if, if you wanted, let's close this up.
I think it's a great idea. Brad, I really, we appreciate the fact that you came on. I know it's been months and months and months of preparation to get you over here. But it's great. You know, definitely look forward to having you back on again. I think it would be great. This was an awesome conversation. And we'll look forward to carrying this over to the after show and kind of kick back and talk about a few other things.
Look,
music.
Come on in. And look, I want to thank you both for having me on here. It has taken months for us to have the planets align. Hell, it took a pandemic for it to happen. But I'm going to tell you something. That is making lemonade out of lemons right there. This has been long overdue. I'm glad that we've done it. And this has been an amazing conversation. I felt like I didn't even know it was an hour. You know, it was like I feel like there's so many cool things that we touched on, and I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to do so. I look forward to hanging out in the green room.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Let's go do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it now. Right. And guys, onthechain.io, you can always check out onthechain.io. You can see all the content creators there. Also, you know, where our podcasts and other platforms we're on. We're on some decentralized platforms as well. So I recommend you go over there. And also, if you look down below, there's the link to the after show. Come on, follow us over. Get in line. Let's do it. Let's go talk to the after show. We're going to talk about some music and some fun stuff.
Come on in.
Do it. Let's go do it. All right. We're out of here. See you guys. Thanks for being here.
See you, man. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.